Shadow stopped growling the moment he reached the open door, and that scared the veteran more than the blood on the floorboards. Gunfire cracked somewhere behind the cabin as Cole dragged himself through knee-deep snow, one hand clamped to his bleeding side, while Shadow barked at the dark trees like he recognized someone hiding there. Then the old cabin door creaked open by itself again, even though nobody had touched it. What do you think was waiting inside that house? The first snowstorm of the season rolled across the Bitterroot Mountains like smoke drifting over a battlefield. Cole Bennett tightened both hands around the cracked steering wheel of his old Chevy Silverado as sleet hammered the windshield hard enough to sound like gravel. The truck heater coughed weak bursts of lukewarm air that smelled faintly of rust and burned dust. Beside him, Shadow lifted his head from the passenger seat and stared through the windshield into the whitening dark ahead. "You picked a hell of a week for a road trip," Cole muttered. The German shepherd's ears twitched once at the sound of his voice, then settled again. The highway behind them had disappeared nearly 20 miles ago. Now there was only a narrow logging road winding through endless black pine forests north of Lolo National Forest. Snow gathered in thick ridges along the hood of the truck, while the wipers fought a losing battle against the storm. Cole hadn't planned on being here. 3 days earlier, he'd been sleeping in the back of the Chevy outside a truck stop near Idaho Falls, wrapped in an old military poncho liner, while Semis rattled the frozen pavement around him all night. Then the letter arrived. Certified mail, a law office in Missoula. At first, he thought it was another debt collector. Instead, it was inheritance paperwork. His uncle, Raymond Bennett, had died of a stroke at 73 years old and left Cole ownership of a cabin property in western Montana. Raymond Bennett, a man Cole barely remembered, a man his father used to drink with in silence after returning from overseas deployments. A man who disappeared into the mountains sometime in the late 90s and almost never contacted the family again. Cole hadn't spoken to him in over 15 years. Yet somehow, the old man left him everything. The lawyer on the phone sounded nervous when Cole asked about the property. "There's no active power line," he had said carefully. "No running utilities either. Nearest town is 40 miles south. Then why the hell would anybody want it?" Long silence. Then, "Your uncle specifically requested that you come in person." Cole should have sold it sight unseen, should have signed the paperwork remotely, and walked away with whatever little cash the land might bring. Instead, something about the call bothered him. Maybe it was the lawyer's voice. Maybe it was the fact Raymond had served with Cole's father before Afghanistan swallowed him whole. Or maybe it was because Cole had nowhere else left to go. The Silverado fishtailed suddenly on black ice. Cole corrected instinctively. Shadow braced himself against the seat without panic, steady as a trained soldier riding through turbulence. "Easy," Cole muttered. His right knee throbbed sharply beneath his jeans. Old injury, shrapnel damage outside Kandahar. Cold weather always woke it up like a bad memory crawling out of the dirt. The GPS signal died completely. A mile later, the road narrowed again, swallowed by towering pines bent heavy beneath snow. Then Cole saw it. A mailbox leaning sideways beside a split-rail fence almost buried in white Bennett. The faded black letters were barely visible beneath ice. Cole slowed the truck. Headlights swept upward through the trees and finally landed on the cabin. It stood alone on a ridge above the valley like something abandoned by time itself. 2 stories, dark cedar walls, a steep roof loaded with snow. One side of the porch sagged several inches lower than the other. No lights, no smoke, nothing but wind. Cole killed the engine. Silence crashed down immediately. The kind of silence that felt thick, heavy. The storm muffled everything except the groan of pine branches swaying overhead. Cole sat still for a moment. His military instincts hated the place instantly. Too quiet, too isolated, Too many sight lines from the surrounding tree line. Shadow stood before Cole even opened the door. The dog jumped down into the snow first, nose already working the air. His paws crunched softly across the frozen ground while vapor curled from his muzzle. Cole grabbed his duffel and stepped out into knee-deep snow. Cold hit hard enough to sting his teeth. The cabin sat about 40 yards uphill from the truck. No tire tracks, no fresh disturbances. Just untouched snow glowing pale beneath the storm clouds. Shadow suddenly stopped moving, completely stopped. Cole noticed it immediately. The dog's posture changed first. Head lowered, ears forward, tail rigid. Not aggression, recognition. What is it? Shadow didn't move. Cole followed the dog's stare toward the front porch. Then he saw it. The front door was open, not wide, only a few inches, but enough. A thin strip of darkness cut through the front entrance like a wound. Cole frowned slowly. The lawyer had said the place had been locked for over 20 years. Wind pushed lightly against the door, making it creak almost softly against the frame. Cole's stomach tightened. Shadow released a low growl deep in his throat. Not loud. The kind he used overseas before detecting explosives near convoy routes. Cole felt the old reflex hit him instantly, heart slowing instead of speeding up. Eyes scanning windows, roof line, tree line, possible concealment positions. His hand moved automatically toward the knife, clipped inside his jacket. Snow crunched beneath his boots as he climbed the porch steps carefully, each board groaning under his weight. The closer he got, the colder the air felt leaking from inside the cabin. Shadow refused to step onto the porch. He stood frozen at the bottom of the stairs, staring into the darkness beyond the doorway. Cole looked back at him. "You smell something?" The dog didn't blink. Another gust of wind drifted through the cracked opening. This time, Cole caught it too. Wood smoke, old dust, and something metallic underneath it. Something faint. Something his brain recognized before his memory did. Burned gun oil. Cole's jaw tightened. The porch light above him swung slightly in the wind with a dry squeak. The door creaked open another inch by itself. Behind it, the cabin waited in complete darkness. And for the first time since leaving Afghanistan, Cole Bennett felt the unmistakable sensation that something inside a building was waiting for him to enter first. Shadow finally stepped onto the porch, but he did not cross the doorway. He stood beside Cole, staring into the blackness with the stiff stillness of a dog remembering something terrible. Then, very quietly, Shadow whimpered once, and Cole realized the dog was afraid, not nervous, not cautious, afraid. A cold pulse moved slowly through Cole's chest. During 2 deployments in Afghanistan, Shadow had walked through blown-out villages littered with burned vehicles and pressure plates hidden beneath dirt roads. Cole had seen the dog hold steady while mortar fire rattled windows half a mile away. But now the German shepherd stood frozen outside a dark cabin in Montana, with his ears pinned halfway back and every muscle tight beneath his black and tan coat. Cole pulled the flashlight from his jacket pocket. The beam cut through the darkness beyond the cracked doorway. Dust floated slowly through the light like drifting ash. "Stay close," Cole murmured. Shadow finally stepped forward beside him. The floorboards groaned under their weight as they entered the cabin together. The smells inside hit harder now. Old cedar, cold fireplace soot, dust, and beneath it all that faint metallic scent again. Gun oil. The flashlight swept across the front room. Furniture sat beneath faded sheets draped like bodies. Hunting trophies hung crooked on the walls. A grandfather clock stood silent near the staircase, frozen at 11:17. No electricity, no sound except wind-scraping branches against the roof. Cole nudged the front door shut behind them with his boot. The latch clicked softly. Immediately, the darkness felt heavier. The beam from his flashlight moved carefully across windows first. Standard habit. Check visibility. Check entry points. Check movement. His breathing slowed automatically into the rhythm he used before clearing compounds overseas. Shadow stayed glued to his left side. Cole noticed the dog sniffing constantly now, searching, tracking. Then the flashlight dropped toward the hardwood floor. Cole stopped moving. Fresh footprints, large boot prints pressed sharply through the dust, leading away from the front entrance toward the back hallway. Not old, hours old at most. The edges were still crisp. Snowmelt darkened portions of the tracks. Someone had walked through this cabin recently, very recently. Cole crouched slowly, studying them. Size 11, maybe. Heavy tread, military-style outsole. His jaw tightened. Shadow released another low growl. Cole stood carefully and scanned the room again. Every instinct screamed occupied structure. He moved toward the hallway without speaking. His boots rolled heel to toe, almost silently, across the floorboards while the flashlight cut slowly through the dark ahead, left hand free, right hand gripping the flashlight hard enough to use it as a weapon, if necessary. The hallway narrowed toward the rear of the cabin. Old family photographs lined the walls. Most were too dusty to make out clearly, but one stopped Cole for half a second. His father, younger, army fatigues, standing beside Raymond Bennett outside some desert outpost. Cole looked away immediately. A metallic clang suddenly exploded somewhere deeper inside the cabin. Cole spun instinctively toward the sound, and the hallway disappeared. Heat slammed into him. White sunlight, sand whipping through the air, the inside of a Humvee rattling violently, radio static screaming in his ear. Contact left! Contact left! An explosion rocked the vehicle. Cole smelled burning rubber and blood before he even realized he was back in Afghanistan. His pulse surged hard enough to blur his vision. Someone yelling. Machine gun fire hammering nearby walls. A body dragging across gravel. Cole jerked backward so violently. His shoulder slammed into the cabin wall. The flashlight beam shook wildly. Shadow barked once, sharp and explosive. The sound snapped Cole back instantly. Montana, cabin, snowstorm, not Kandahar. Cole sucked in a hard breath through clenched teeth. His hands were trembling. Shadow had planted himself directly in front of him now, body squared toward the darkness ahead like a shield. Cole lowered one hand to the dog's neck briefly. Warm fur, real, grounding. "I'm good," he muttered, though his voice sounded rough even to himself. The dog didn't move. For a moment, neither of them did. Then another sound drifted faintly through the hallway. Crackling fire. Cole frowned. Fire meant heat. Heat meant someone was here now, not earlier. Now. The boot prints continued deeper toward the rear rooms. Cole advanced slowly again. Every few feet he paused to listen. The cabin creaked softly around them as wind battered the exterior walls. At the end of the hallway, faint orange light flickered around a doorway. Cole killed his flashlight instantly. Darkness swallowed everything except the weak glow ahead. He listened. No voices, no footsteps, only fire. Shadow's ears lifted slightly. Cole edged forward until he reached the doorway and glanced inside. The room beyond looked completely different from the rest of the cabin. Clean, organized, alive. A wood stove crackled warmly against the far wall. Shelves of old books lined the room beside mounted elk antlers and faded Marine Corps photographs. Someone had recently chopped fresh firewood stacked neatly beside the stove. A dented kettle steamed softly on top, and near the fireplace sat an open can of dog food beside a metal bowl. Still wet, still fresh. Cole's eyes narrowed slowly. Someone had fed a dog here less than an hour ago. Shadow stepped into the doorway first. His growl stopped abruptly. Instead, the dog stared toward the far side of the room. Cole followed his gaze. An old leather armchair sat partially turned away from the fire. At first it looked empty. Then the chair moved slightly. A man's voice emerged quietly from the shadows. "You still clear rooms too loud, Bennett." Cole's pulse slammed once. An elderly man slowly leaned forward into the firelight. Gray beard, weathered face. Deep lines around pale eyes that looked sharp despite the age behind them. He wore a thick wool sweater and held a bolt-action rifle calmly across his lap, not aimed, ready. The old man studied Cole for several silent seconds before his eyes shifted toward Shadow. "Well," he said softly, "I'll be damned." Shadow took one cautious step forward. The old man's expression changed, not surprise, recognition. "Been a long time since Kandahar, buddy." Cole's grip tightened on the flashlight. "How do you know that, dog?" The fire cracked loudly between them. Outside, wind hammered snow against the cabin windows. The old man slowly rested one hand on the rifle stock. "Because," he said quietly, "your uncle asked me to watch over both of you." Cole didn't blink. The old man's eyes held steady on him. Then he added, "And because your father saved my life before they buried his name." The fire popped sharply in the stove. Cole stood motionless in the doorway, while snow hissed softly against the cabin windows behind him. The old man's rifle still rested across his lap, steady and casual in the hands of someone who knew exactly how to use it. Shadow moved first. The German shepherd stepped cautiously into the room, nose working the air. His growl faded into a low rumble before disappearing completely. The old man watched the dog approach. "Well," he murmured quietly, "you got gray around the muzzle too." Shadow stopped a few feet away. Then, slowly, his tail gave one uncertain thump against the wooden floor. Cole noticed immediately. The dog remembered him, or smelled something familiar enough to trust. Cole kept the flashlight aimed low but didn't lower it completely. "Start talking," he said. The old man nodded once toward the empty chair beside the stove. "You're cold," I said, "talk." For a moment, neither man moved. Then the old man leaned forward carefully and set the rifle against the wall beside him. Deliberate. Slow enough not to trigger instinct. "My name's Walter Grady," he said. "Your uncle called me Walt. Most people still alive don't call me anything anymore." Cole stayed standing. Walter glanced toward Shadow. "Kandahar Province," he said quietly. 2011. Route Bear Claw outside Forward Operating Base Wilson. Your dog found 2 pressure plates before your convoy rolled over them. Cole's expression tightened slightly. "How do you know that?" Walter shrugged faintly. "Because Raymond sent me the photographs afterward." Cole felt the room sharpen around him. Nobody had photographs from Kandahar except military personnel and the men who'd been there. Shadow finally moved closer to the stove and lay down, though he kept one eye fixed on Walter. The old Marine reached toward the kettle slowly. "Tea?" "No." Walter poured himself a cup anyway. His hands shook slightly with age, but stopped trembling the moment they wrapped around the warm mug. Cole studied him carefully now. 70 maybe. Broad shoulders gone thinner with time. Marine Corps tattoo faded blue beneath his sleeve. A scar disappeared into his collar near the neck. Not some mountain drifter, not a squatter. A man who'd spent years looking over his shoulder. "You said my father saved your life," Cole said. "What does that mean?" Walter stared into the steam rising from his mug for several seconds before answering. "It means your father died because he trusted the wrong men." The room fell quiet except for the wind. Cole's jaw flexed once. "My father died in a training accident." Walter looked up slowly. "No," he said. "That's what they told your mother." Cole felt heat crawl upward through his chest. The old, familiar kind. Dangerous heat. He stepped farther into the room. "You better be real careful what comes out of your mouth next." Walter nodded calmly. "Fair enough." He reached slowly toward the table beside his chair. Cole tensed instantly. Walter noticed. A tired smile crossed his face. "Still wired tight," he muttered. He slid an old photograph across the table instead. Cole picked it up carefully. 3 soldiers stood beside a battered Humvee somewhere deep in desert terrain. One was younger Walter, one was Raymond Bennett, and the third, Cole's breathing, slowed. His father, Captain Daniel Bennett, smiling, alive. Cole hadn't seen that smile in over 20 years. On the back of the photograph, faded marker ink read, "Kandahar, October 2002. The year before his father died. Cole stared at it silently. He talked about you, Walter said. All the time. Cole swallowed once. My father barely talked at all. Not at home, maybe. The fire crackled again. Shadow lifted his head suddenly toward the hallway behind them. Cole noticed the movement instantly. The dog's ears tilted forward. Listening, Walter noticed too. Without a word, the old Marine reached over and quietly switched off a small lanterns sitting beside the chair. Half the room vanished into shadow. Cole's pulse sharpened immediately. What is it? He asked. Walter didn't answer at first. Both men listened. Wind groaned against the cabin walls. Then, a soft creak somewhere deeper inside the house. Not the storm. Wait. A footstep. Shadow rose instantly, hackles lifting along his spine. Cole killed his flashlight. The room dropped into near darkness except for the orange glow of the stove. Walter picked up the rifle without panic. Smooth. Practiced. How many people know you came here? Walter whispered. Just the lawyer. Walter cursed softly under his breath. Another creak echoed faintly upstairs. Cole's instincts took over immediately. He moved toward the wall beside the doorway, body angled away from the entrance. Shadow positioned himself beside him, automatically, like muscle memory from deployment days. Walter nodded once toward the staircase, visible through the hallway. Second floor, he whispered. North side. Cole listened carefully. Nothing. Then a faint metallic click drifted downward through the dark. Cole knew the sound instantly. Weapon sling buckle. Somebody was upstairs. Shadow released a low growl that vibrated through the floorboards. Walter chambered a round quietly into the rifle. You see now, the old Marine murmured, eyes fixed on the dark hallway. Why your uncle kept this place locked. Cole's heartbeat slowed into combat rhythm. Every sound sharpened. Every shadow mattered. Outside, snow hammered the cabin roof harder as the storm deepened over the mountain. Then came another sound. A single boot step directly above them. Heavy, slow, intentional. Not hiding anymore. Cole looked toward Walter. Walter looked back at him grimly, and for the first time since entering the cabin, Cole realized the old man wasn't protecting the house from him. He was protecting him from whoever else had already gotten inside. The boot step upstairs stopped. Silence swallowed the cabin again. Cole barely breathed. Shadow stood rigid beside him, eyes fixed on the dark hallway beyond the library. The dog's ears twitched toward the ceiling, tracking movement too faint for human hearing. Walter raised 2 fingers slowly. Wait. Cole hated waiting. In Afghanistan, waiting usually meant somebody else controlled the timing. Another faint creak drifted from above, north side of the cabin. Slow movement. Measured. Not an animal. Walter leaned close enough for Cole to hear him over the storm. There's a back stairwell past the kitchen, he whispered. Leads upstairs behind the north rooms. Cole nodded once. No wasted words. Walter moved toward the library doorway with the rifle shouldered low. Cole slipped out opposite him, flashlight off, hand gripping the combat knife inside his jacket pocket. The cabin seemed colder now. Every floorboard sounded too loud. Wind moaned through gaps in the old walls while branches scraped across the roof like fingernails. Shadow moved ahead of Cole silently. The dog stopped halfway down the hall and sniffed once toward the ceiling. Then his posture shifted, not alert anymore, confused. Cole noticed it immediately. The German shepherd looked back toward him, uncertain for the first time since entering the house. Another sound floated faintly overhead, a soft, dragging noise. Cole glanced toward Walter. The old Marine frowned. Injured, maybe, Walter mouthed silently. Or bait, Cole thought. They reached the kitchen. Moonlight filtered weakly through frosted windows above an old cast-iron sink. Cabinets hung crooked on the walls. The smell of coffee grounds and wood smoke lingered faintly in the air. Somebody had been living here, not hiding. Living. Walter pointed toward a narrow staircase, disappearing upward behind a pantry door. Cole moved first, one careful step at a time. His bad knee throbbed sharply climbing the stairs, But adrenaline shoved the pain scent aside. Shadow stayed directly behind him, nails clicking softly against old wood. Halfway up, Cole froze. A faint beam of light moved briefly beneath a doorway at the end of the upstairs hall. Flashlight. Somebody was definitely up here. Walter eased up behind Cole with the rifle ready. The hallway above was narrow and lined with closed doors. Dust coated the floor except for fresh tracks moving toward the far bedroom. Cole glanced down. Boot prints again. Heavy tread. Fresh snow still melting around the edges. A gust rattled the windows hard enough to make Cole flinch instinctively. For half a second he wasn't in Montana anymore. Night raid. Mud walls. Incoming mortar. His pulse surged violently. Shadow pressed against his leg immediately, grounding him before the spiral fully took hold. Cole shut his eyes once. Breathe. Back here. Back now. The flashlight beam flickered again beneath the far doorway. Walter leaned toward him. You take left, he whispered. Cole nodded. They moved together, slow, controlled. Cole reached the bedroom door first and pressed himself beside the frame. Walter positioned opposite with the rifle aimed chest high. 3, 2, 1. Cole shoved the door open hard. The room was empty. Cold mountain air blasted through shattered window glass. Snow swirled across the floorboards. The flashlight lay abandoned near the bed, still on. Shadow rushed inside first, nose sweeping fast across the room. Cole scanned corners automatically. No target, no movement. Then he noticed the open closet door. Inside the closet, nailed to the back wall, hung an old military map, Afghanistan. Southern provinces. Red circles marked several locations by hand. Cole stepped closer slowly. Kandahar, Helmand, Coast. Coordinates scribbled in faded black marker. Walter lowered the rifle slightly behind him. Damn, the old Marine muttered. Cole looked toward the broken window. Snow on the roof outside had collapsed inward near the edge. Whoever had been here escaped seconds before they entered. Shadow suddenly barked once. Sharp, urgent. The dog scratched hard at the floor beside the fireplace chimney running through the bedroom wall. Cole turned. Shadow. The dog kept scratching. Walter frowned. What's he got? Cole knelt beside the shepherd. The floorboards here sounded different, hollow. Shadow dug harder, claws scraping wood. Then came the sound. Metal. Walter's face changed instantly. Slowly, the old Marine crossed the room and dropped to one knee beside Cole. No, he whispered under his breath. Cole grabbed the edge of a loose floorboard and pried upward. Dust exploded into the air. Beneath the board sat an old steel ring recessed into a square metal hatch hidden under the floor. The metal was painted dark, military green beneath years of grime. Shadow stepped back but kept staring at it intensely. Walter looked pale in the moonlight now. I searched this cabin for 11 years, he said quietly. Every wall, every crawl space. Cole wrapped both hands around the steel ring. Cold metal bit into his palms. He pulled. At first, nothing moved. Then the hatch groaned upward with a deep, rusted moan. A burst of stale air rolled out from below, carrying the smell of concrete, machine oil, and old earth. Darkness opened beneath them. Cole aimed the flashlight downward. Steel ladder, concrete shaft. Deep, very deep. Shadow stared into the hole without blinking. Walter looked like a man seeing a ghost. Raymond, he murmured softly. You stubborn old bastard. Cole swept the flashlight farther down. At the bottom of the shaft sat a narrow bunker corridor disappearing into darkness beneath the cabin. Military construction. Not homemade, not civilian. Cole's pulse slowed into that dangerous calm again. The same calm before entering tunnels overseas. Shadow released another low growl. Not fear this time. Recognition. Then, from somewhere deep beneath the cabin, a faint mechanical sound echoed upward through the shaft. Click. Cole and Walter both looked at each other instantly. Somebody else was already down there. The sound echoed upward again. Click. Metal against metal. Then silence. Snow hissed through the broken upstairs window while cold air drifted across the room. Shadow stood over the open hatch, body stiff as wire, staring into the darkness below. Walter lowered himself carefully beside the opening. "You hear movement?" he whispered. Cole shook his head once. No, just the click. The old Marine's eyes narrowed. Safety switch, maybe. Cole looked down the ladder again. The bunker shaft disappeared nearly 20 feet underground before opening into a narrow, concrete corridor. Old utility lights lined the ceiling below, dead and coated in dust. Military-grade construction, definitely Cold War era, maybe older. Walter rubbed one hand slowly across his beard. Raymond told me there were places in these mountains the government forgot existed. He glanced toward Cole. I thought he was drunk. Another gust rattled the cabin hard enough to shake dust from the ceiling. Shadow growled again. Cole noticed the dog's ears turning slightly now, tracking something deeper underground. "Stay here," Walter said quietly. Cole looked at him. That wasn't a suggestion. Walter met his stare evenly. "Your uncle spent half his life keeping whatever's down there hidden. If somebody already found their way inside, we don't walk blind into it." Cole crouched beside the hatch again. The smell drifting upward pulled at memory. Concrete, machine oil, old electronics. It smelled almost exactly like certain underground storage bunkers outside Bagram Air Base. The kind built to survive airstrikes. The kind designed to keep secrets buried. Cole reached for the ladder. Walter grabbed his arm immediately. "You didn't hear a damn word I just said." Cole pulled free. "I spent 10 years crawling into holes people told me not to enter." "And how many men came back out with you?" The question hung in the room. Cole didn't answer, because he knew the number instantly. Not enough. Shadow moved first. The German shepherd stepped onto the steel ladder carefully, descending 2 rungs before stopping to look back up at Cole. Walter cursed softly. "That dog's gonna get you killed." Usually it's the opposite. Cole started down. The steel ladder groaned faintly beneath his weight while the flashlight beam swept downward through floating dust. His bad knee flared painfully halfway down, but adrenaline drowned most of it out. At the bottom, his boots touched concrete. Cold air wrapped around him immediately. Shadow stood beside the corridor entrance, nose low, ears alert. Walter climbed down after them slower than either of them liked. The bunker hallway stretched maybe 40 feet ahead before turning sharply right. Concrete walls, exposed pipes overhead, military stenciling barely visible beneath grime. Section C authorized access. Only Cole swept the flashlight slowly across the corridor. No footprints, no movement, yet somebody had made that sound. Walter noticed something near the wall first. Jesus. Cole turned the light. An old electrical panel hung open beside the corridor entrance. Fresh scratches marked the metal lock. Somebody had forced it recently. The old Marine touched the edge carefully. Not more than a few days ago. Shadow suddenly moved ahead. Fast. The shepherd trotted down the hallway before Cole could stop him. Shadow. The dog ignored him. Cole and Walter followed quickly. The bunker widened into a larger underground room cluttered with rusted filing cabinets, stacked ammo crates, and old military radios covered beneath canvas tarps. A faded American flag hung crooked from one wall. Cole slowed. The room looked untouched by time, like somebody sealed it in 2002 and never came back. Shadow stopped near an old desk against the far wall. The dog sniffed once, then sat down quietly. Cole aimed the flashlight across the desk surface. A cassette recorder sat there beside several dusty tapes, one tape already loaded inside. Walter stared at it silently. No damn way. Cole stepped closer. The recorder had power. A faint green light glowed weakly on the side. Somebody turned it on recently. Cole looked toward Walter. "You touch this." Walter shook his head slowly. "Never even knew this room existed." The silence deepened underground. Cole reached toward the cassette player carefully. His hand stopped halfway there. Something about the moment tightened his chest, unexpectedly, like standing outside a hospital room before hearing bad news. Shadow nudged Cole's leg softly, grounding him again. Cole pressed play. Static exploded through the bunker. Harsh, loud enough to make Cole flinch instinctively. Then came rotor noise, helicopter blades, radio chatter. A younger voice crackled through static. Testing. Hold on, damn thing working. Cole froze. His father, older than the photographs, but unmistakable, Captain Daniel Bennett. Walter lowered himself slowly into a nearby chair like his legs suddenly stopped working. The tape hissed loudly. Then Daniel Bennett spoke again. If you're hearing this, then somebody finally found the bunker. Cole stared at the recorder without blinking. The room around him disappeared, not into panic this time, into memory. His father shaving before deployment. His father tying fishing line at the lake one summer. His father saluting from behind airport glass before boarding a military transport. The tape crackled. I don't know who made it down here first, Daniel said quietly. Maybe Raymond, maybe Walter, maybe my boy. Cole swallowed hard. Walter shut his eyes briefly. The old recording continued beneath the hum of failing electronics. We were ordered to bury what happened outside Kandahar. Civilians got hit during a night strike. Women, kids. Static burst violently across the tape. Command wanted it erased, said the footage would disappear. Said witnesses would disappear too. Cole's hand tightened slowly around the edge of the desk. I kept copies, Daniel continued. Names, orders, video files. Somebody needed proof. The tape clicked softly. Then Cole stared at the recorder. That's it, he asked quietly. Walter looked sick. No, the old Marine muttered. That's just what he left where anybody could find it. Shadow suddenly lifted his head sharply toward the dark corridor behind them. Every muscle in the dog's body locked tight. Then the bunker lights flickered once overhead. Cole turned instantly. Somewhere deeper underground, a heavy steel door slowly groaned open. The sound rolled through the bunker like distant thunder. Shadow barked once and lunged toward the dark hallway before Cole grabbed his collar. Easy. The dog strained hard against him, low growls vibrating deep in his chest. Walter stood up too quickly and nearly knocked over the chair behind him. The old Marine steadied himself against the desk, rifle raised toward the corridor. You hear that before, Cole whispered. Walter shook his head once. No. The steel door groaned again, then stopped. Silence returned. Cole aimed the flashlight toward the hallway. The beam stretched across cracked concrete walls and vanished into darkness where the corridor turned sharply left. Nothing moved, no footsteps, no voices. Yet somebody, or something, had opened that door. Walter stepped closer beside him. That bunker goes farther under the ridge than this section, he said quietly. Raymond only ever talked about it once. What'd he say? That some doors were better left shut? Cole almost answered, but Shadow suddenly jerked hard toward the hallway again. This time the dog wasn't focused underground. He was staring upward, toward the cabin above them. Cole froze. A faint vibration drifted through the bunker ceiling. Crunch, crunch, tires in snow. Walter heard it too. Both men looked at each other. Instantly. Vehicle. Outside. Cole killed the flashlight. The bunker dropped into darkness except for the weak green glow from the cassette recorder. Move, Walter whispered. They climbed the ladder fast. Shadow reached the top first, scrambling through the hatch into the upstairs bedroom while snow gusted through the broken window. Cole followed with his pulse hammering hard now. Not panic, recognition. This was the feeling before contact. Walter shut the hatch quietly behind them. The cabin creaked under heavy wind while all three listened. Crunch, crunch. Closer now, a vehicle climbing the ridge outside. Cole moved toward the shattered bedroom window and lowered himself carefully beside it. Below the ridge line, headlights cut through the storm between the trees. Black SUV. No markings. Engine low and powerful. It stopped halfway down the property instead of pulling directly to the cabin. Professional. Cole's stomach tightened. 2 doors opened. 3 men stepped out wearing dark winter gear. Not hunters, not locals. Their movement gave them away instantly. Spread formation, spacing, watching angles. One remained near the vehicle scanning tree lines, while the others approached on foot. Shadow's growl deepened beside the window. Walter cursed softly behind him. They found us quicker than I thought. Cole glanced back. Who are they? The old Marine didn't answer immediately. Instead, he crossed the room and shut off the upstairs lantern completely. The cabin fell into near total darkness again. Only snowlight filtered through the broken window. Walter worked the bolt on his rifle quietly. You ever hear the name Mason Vick? Cole frowned. No. Walter's expression hardened. You're about to. Below them, flashlight beams moved slowly through the trees. Controlled sweeps. Searching. One beam paused on Cole's truck parked near the fence line. Another man crouched beside the tire tracks leading up to the cabin. Cole knew exactly what he was doing. Reading movement. Estimating numbers. Military contractor maybe. Former special operations. Not amateurs. Walter leaned beside the wall away from the window. Mason Vick used to run private security contracts overseas after Iraq. Before that, he hesitated slightly. Before that, he worked inside the same circles as your father. Cole looked at him sharply. What circles? Walter ignored the question. Your uncle spent years hiding whatever's in that bunker because Mason's people kept searching for it. Why? Walter stared toward the moving lights outside. Because your father took something before he died. The words landed hard. Cole's pulse slowed strangely. Focused. What kind of something? I don't know. You expect me to believe that? Walter's jaw tightened. I know enough to stay alive. That's about it. Below them, one of the men reached the porch. Another moved toward the rear of the cabin. Flanking positions. Cole recognized the tactic instantly. Shadow suddenly backed away from the window and sniffed sharply toward the downstairs hallway. The dog's ears flattened. Cole followed him immediately. What? Shadow moved toward the staircase. Fast. Cole caught the faint sound half a second later. Wood creaking downstairs. Somebody inside. Cole's blood went cold. They never heard the entry. Walter spun toward the stairwell with the rifle raised. Back door, he whispered. Cole drew the combat knife from his jacket. No firearm. Left Idaho 2 broke to renew the concealed permit. Now he regretted every mile of that drive. A shadow moved briefly across the lower hallway beneath the stairs. Quick, silent, professional. Shadow barked explosively and charged downward before either man could stop him. Shadow. The dog hit the bottom floor, growling violently. Cole rushed after him 2 steps at a time, Walter right behind. The first floor lay almost completely dark except for dying firelight from the library stove. The back kitchen door stood open. Snow blew inside across the floorboards. Shadow stood near the doorway, snarling into the storm outside. Gone. Whoever entered had already disappeared back into the trees. Cole reached the kitchen seconds later and scanned the darkness beyond the porch. Nothing. No movement. No flashlight beams anymore. That bothered him more than seeing them. Walter slowly lowered the rifle. Recon, he muttered. They're probing the cabin. Cole shut the back door hard against the wind. Then he noticed Shadow standing rigid beside the old kitchen table. The dog wasn't looking outside anymore. He was staring at something sitting on the floorboards. A small black object. Cole crouched carefully. Phone. Satellite phone. New. Powered on. Walter's face drained of color. Cole picked it up slowly. The screen lit immediately. One unread message glowed against the dark display. We know Bennett is inside. A second message appeared beneath it almost instantly. Tell him Mason Vick never forgot Kandahar. Then the phone began to ring. The sound echoed through the dead cabin while snow battered the windows outside. Neither man moved. Shadow's growl deepened again. Cole stared at the screen. Unknown number. Still ringing. Walter looked at him grimly. Don't answer that. But Cole already knew whoever was on the other side wanted him to hear something, and somehow they already knew his name. The satellite phone kept ringing, sharp, mechanical, wrong inside the dead silence of the cabin. Cole stared at the glowing screen while Shadow stood rigid beside him, teeth barely visible beneath lifted lips. Walter looked toward the windows. "They're testing you," the old Marine muttered. The phone continued vibrating against the floorboards. Cole finally picked it up. Walter grabbed his wrist immediately. "Don't." Cole looked at him. "You already know who it is." Walter's jaw tightened. "That's exactly why you shouldn't answer." The ringing stopped. For half a second, the cabin fell silent again except for the storm. Then the phone buzzed once more. New message. "Look in the bunker." Cole's stomach tightened. Another message appeared immediately beneath it. "Ask Walter what happened to your father on October 14th." Walter went completely still. Cole noticed. Not fear, recognition. Cole slowly turned toward him. "What happened on October 14th? Walter didn't answer. Outside, wind slammed against the cabin hard enough to rattle the windows. The old Marine rubbed one iron hand across his face before finally speaking. "That was the day your father stopped following orders." Cole waited. Walter looked older suddenly. Not 71. Ancient. He wasn't supposed to survive that mission. The words hung heavy in the kitchen. Cole felt something cold move slowly through his chest. "Start talking." Walter glanced toward Shadow. The dog hadn't stopped staring at the satellite phone. "They sent your father into Kandahar to clean up evidence after a drone strike hit the wrong compound," Walter said quietly. "Official story blamed insurgents. Problem was," he swallowed once, "there were witnesses." Cole leaned against the counter without realizing he'd moved. The kitchen light from the stove cast long shadows across Walter's face. "Your father recorded everything," the old Marine continued. "Bodies, coordinates, radio orders. He said somebody had to answer for it." Cole remembered his father disappearing into the garage for hours after returning home from deployment. The silence, the drinking, the way he checked the locks twice every night. Walter kept talking. "Command wanted the footage buried. So did the contractors working security in the area. Mason Vick." Walter nodded once. He was overseeing the operation. The storm outside deepened, snow striking the windows sideways now. Cole looked toward the dark hallway leading back underground. "You said my father took something. He took proof." Walter's eyes drifted toward the bunker hatch upstairs as if he could see through the ceiling. Not just video, financial records, contractor payments, internal communications, enough to destroy careers. Cole's pulse slowed strangely, focused, dangerously calm. Then why wasn't any of it released? Walter didn't answer immediately, because he already knew what came next. Cole saw it on his face before he heard it. "Somebody sold him out," Cole said quietly. Walter looked away. The silence confirmed everything. Shadow suddenly moved toward the back door and sniffed low near the frame. Cole noticed fresh snow blowing beneath it. The latch wasn't fully shut. Someone had opened it again. Recently, Cole crossed the kitchen immediately and checked outside through the narrow glass pane. Nothing. Dark trees, snow. But the feeling remained. Eyes on the cabin. Walter chambered another round into the rifle, softly. "Mason had men everywhere after Kandahar," he said. "Private contractors, intelligence people, former operators needing money. Your father trusted the wrong officer inside the task force." Cole looked at him sharply. "Who?" Walter hesitated, long enough to matter. Then, Mason Vick. The name landed differently this time. He wasn't just connected, he was the betrayal itself. Cole remembered something suddenly. A funeral. Rain, rows of uniforms. A tall man wearing dark sunglasses speaking quietly with his mother near the cemetery road. Cole had been 11. The memory hit hard enough to stop his breathing for a second. "He was there," Cole said quietly. Walter frowned. "At the funeral," the old Marine shut his eyes briefly. "Yeah." Cole stared at the snow outside the window, his father's funeral. Mason standing beside the grave, while people thanked the military for their sacrifice. All those years. All those nights his mother cried alone at the kitchen table, believing it was a training accident. Cole's jaw tightened so hard pain shot into his temples. Shadow moved beside him and leaned his shoulder gently against Cole's leg. Grounding again. Always grounding. Walter spoke carefully now. Your father knew somebody high up was leaking information. He just figured it out too late. Cole looked back at him. How'd he die? The old Marine went silent, not avoiding the answer, bracing for it. Outside, a branch cracked loudly somewhere in the storm. Neither man reacted. Walter's voice dropped low. Vehicle ambush outside Kandahar city. Official report said insurgents hit the convoy with an IED. Cole's chest tightened. But? Walter looked him directly in the eyes. There was no IED. The room seemed to shrink around them. Cole barely blinked. Walter continued quietly. The road had already been cleared by engineers that morning. Your father signed the report himself. He swallowed once. The convoy was rerouted at the last minute. Cole's breathing slowed. Combat calm again. The dangerous kind. Mason rerouted it, he said. Walter didn't answer. Didn't need to. The old Marine walked slowly toward the stove and stared into the flames. When we reached the vehicles, he said softly, your father was still alive. Cole felt every muscle lock tight. What? Walter's voice sounded distant now, barely breathing. Burned bad. He grabbed my vest and kept trying to say one thing over and over. The storm outside vanished. The cabin vanished. Everything narrowed to Walter's next words. What'd he say? Walter looked down at his shaking hands. He said, the old Marine swallowed hard. Protect my boy. Silence crashed through the room. Cole looked away sharply toward the dark window. His reflection stared back at him faintly in the glass. Older now. Tired, broken in too many places, and somehow still standing. Shadow rested his head slowly against Cole's knee. No sound, no movement, just warmth. Then, a sudden flash of white light swept across the cabin windows from outside. Headlights, close, much closer than before. Walter spun instantly toward the front room. Down. An engine roared somewhere near the porch. Then came the sound of boots hitting snow outside the cabin. More than before. A lot more. The sound of boots crunching through snow surrounded the cabin from 3 different directions. Disciplined spacing. Controlled movement, not random. Cole dropped instinctively beside the kitchen counter, while Walter moved toward the front room with the rifle tucked tight into his shoulder. Shadow stood low between them, growling hard enough to vibrate the floorboards. Outside, flashlight beams swept across the cabin walls. One paused briefly over the front windows. Another moved toward the rear woodshed. They're setting a perimeter, Cole whispered. Walter nodded grimly. Mason finally stopped being patient. A voice suddenly echoed faintly through the storm outside. Bennett, male, confident, amplified through the wind. We know you're in there. Cole's stomach tightened immediately. Not because of the threat, because the voice sounded familiar somehow, like hearing a song you forgot years ago. Walter froze near the doorway. That's him, the old Marine muttered quietly. Mason Vick, the voice came again. You don't know what your father stole. Shadow barked explosively toward the front windows. A bright beam suddenly flashed through the living room. Somebody was approaching the porch. Walter motioned sharply toward the hallway. Bunker. Now, Cole didn't move. Too easy to trap us down there. Another flashlight beam swept past the kitchen windows. Closer. Cole's mind shifted automatically into tactical rhythm. Entry points, angles, movement lanes. No firearms except Walter's bolt-action rifle. Bad odds. Very bad. The old Marine seemed to read the same calculation in Cole's face. We hold first floor if they breach. Cole grabbed the heavy cast-iron poker beside the stove. Primitive, but solid. Shadow suddenly spun toward the back hallway. His ears snapped forward. Cole caught it a second later. A faint metallic click outside the rear door. Handle movement. Back contact, Cole whispered. Walter pivoted instantly toward the kitchen entrance. The back door exploded inward. Snow and freezing wind burst into the cabin as a dark figure lunged through the doorway, wearing black winter tactical gear. Everything happened at once. Shadow launched first. The German shepherd hit the intruder chest-high before the man could raise his weapon fully. They crashed hard into the kitchen table, sending wood splintering across the floor. The man shouted violently. Cole charged forward. The attacker reached for a handgun. Shadow clamped onto his forearm with terrifying force. The gun discharged once into the ceiling. The blast inside the confined cabin detonated like artillery. Cole froze for half a second. The sound ripped him backward through time. Dust, blood, Humvee fire, screaming over radio static. Contact left. His vision narrowed instantly, pulse hampering, breathing gone. The cabin vanished again, and in that half-second, another figure appeared outside the broken doorway, weapon raised. Walter fired first. The rifle blast shattered the kitchen silence. The second intruder disappeared backward into the storm. Cole snapped back violently to the present. Shadow was still fighting on the floor. The first attacker drove an elbow hard into the dog's ribs while struggling for the handgun. Cole swung the iron poker with both hands. The metal connected against the man's shoulder with a brutal crack. The attacker collapsed sideways against the cabinets. Shadow released instantly and backed toward Cole, growling viciously. "Move!" Walter shouted. Gunfire erupted outside. Rounds punched through cabin walls, spraying splinters across the kitchen. Cole dragged Shadow toward cover behind the stove while Walter fired once more through the doorway. Then Cole saw it. Blood, dark against Shadow's fur. Too much blood. The shepherd staggered suddenly. Cole's chest tightened hard. Shadow. The dog tried to stay standing. His front leg buckled underneath him. Cole dropped beside him immediately. A bullet had torn through the upper shoulder during the chaos. Not fatal, but bad. Very bad. Shadow whined once through clenched teeth. Outside, voices shouted across the snow. They're inside. Backside covered. Walter slammed the broken rear door partially shut and fired another round through the gap. "We don't have time." Cole barely heard him. His hands were already moving automatically. Training, pressure first. Stop bleeding. He ripped off his belt and cinched it high above the wound while Shadow trembled beneath him. The dog never tried to bite, never panicked. He just stared at Cole with those dark eyes while blood soaked through his fur onto the kitchen floor. "Stay with me," Cole muttered roughly. Another burst of gunfire shattered the front windows. Glass exploded across the living room. Walter ducked low behind the wall. "They're pushing inside." Cole grabbed an old medical tin from the cabinet beside the sink. Inside sat dusty supplies Raymond must have stored years ago. Bandages, alcohol, needles. Cole poured whiskey from an old bottle across the wound. Shadow jerked violently but stayed still. "Good dog. God, good dog." Cole threaded a curved suture needle beneath the flickering lantern light while gunfire cracked outside the cabin. The kitchen smelled like blood, smoke, and whiskey now. Walter fired again from the front room. Then came a man's scream outside, followed by silence. Cole worked fast, hands steady despite the chaos. In Afghanistan, he'd patched soldiers exactly like this, beside burning vehicles and shattered roads. But this felt worse somehow, because Shadow trusted him completely. The dog laid his head against Cole's knee while he stitched the torn flesh closed. Outside, wind howled through broken windows. Then a voice called from the darkness beyond the porch. Calm, controlled. "You inherited your father's stubbornness, Bennett. Mason Vick. Much closer now." Cole looked up slowly toward the front room. Walter had gone very still near the doorway. Mason's voice drifted through the storm again. "But your father made one mistake." Cole tightened the final stitch. Blood still soaked through the bandages slowly. Shadow breathed hard but remained conscious. Then Mason said the one thing that made Walter lower his rifle slightly. He trusted Walter Grady. Silence crashed through the cabin. Cole looked up sharply. Walter didn't move, didn't speak, and for the first time since meeting the old Marine, Cole saw guilt instead of fear in his eyes. The cabin groaned under another burst of wind. Outside, snow whipped across the windows so hard it sounded like handfuls of sand thrown against glass. Walter lowered the rifle slowly, not surrendering, remembering. Mason's voice drifted through the storm again from somewhere beyond the porch. "You should tell him what happened, Walt." Cole stood up carefully from beside Shadow. The dog tried to rise too, but his injured leg buckled immediately beneath him. "Easy," Cole muttered softly. Shadow's breathing came fast now. Pain trembled through his body despite the bandages wrapped tight around the shoulder wound. Walter stared at the floorboards. "I didn't betray your father," he said quietly. Outside, somebody laughed, low, mocking. "Maybe not on purpose," Mason called back. Cole moved toward the shattered front window carefully and stayed low beneath the frame. Nothing visible except blowing snow and darkness. Professional positioning, no unnecessary movement. Mason knew better than to silhouette his people. Cole recognized the tactic immediately. Suppress visibility, control angles, force panic. Old contractor playbook. Walter's voice sounded older now. 12 men went into Kandahar with your father that night, he said without looking up. Only 5 knew about the recordings. Cole listened silently. The convoy route changed 30 minutes before departure. Walter swallowed once. I questioned it. Your father questioned it. He rubbed one shaking hand against his face. Mason overrode both of us. Cole's jaw tightened. Outside, boots crunched softly through snow around the perimeter. Still circling. Still tightening the net. Walt continued. When the convoy got hit, Mason was already waiting at the crash site before medevac arrived. Cole looked toward him sharply. That's impossible. Walter nodded grimly. Exactly. Silence settled heavily inside the cabin. The old Marine finally looked up. I should have understood then. Shadow lifted his head weakly from the kitchen floor and growled toward the back hallway. Cole heard it too, movement outside the rear wall. Close, very close. They're repositioning, Cole whispered. Walter snapped back into focus instantly. Combat mode. Whatever guilt lived inside him, survival still came first. We can't stay in one room, he said. Cole nodded once. The cabin had become a kill box. Too many broken sightlines, too many entry points. The storm outside made visibility terrible, but it also worked both ways. Cole crossed quickly into the living room and yanked heavy blankets over the blown-out windows to kill interior light bleed. Shadow limped after him despite the wound. You stay, Cole ordered quietly. The dog ignored him. Of course he did. Walter moved upstairs briefly and returned carrying an old ammunition tin. Inside were improvised perimeter alarms, fishing line, empty cans, old shotgun primers rigged for noise. Cole almost smiled despite everything. Raymond teach you that? Walter snorted softly. Vietnam taught me that. Together they moved through the dark cabin, setting crude warning lines across hallway entrances and stairwells. No wasted movement, no panic. Just old men's war habits refusing to die. Outside, engines rumbled faintly through the storm. More vehicles arriving. Cole's stomach tightened. Mason wasn't probing anymore. He was preparing to end this. Shadow suddenly stopped near the back door and sniffed low against the crack beneath it. Then his ears snapped forward hard. Cole followed the dog instantly. Footsteps. 2 sets. Approaching from the rear woods. Cole crouched beside the kitchen wall and motioned Walter toward the opposite angle. Crossfire set up. The old Marine nodded once. The footsteps stopped. Silence. Then, a bright beam blasted through the back windows. Flashlight. Another from the east side. They were testing reactions again. Shadow growled deeper. Cole's pulse slowed into that cold tunnel calm he hadn't felt since Afghanistan. Everything sharpened, breathing, floor creaks, wind direction. He could almost smell incoming violence before it happened. A sudden metallic snap exploded upstairs, one of Walter's alarms. Cole looked up instantly. They're inside. Walter pivoted toward the staircase. Too late. A dark figure burst from the upstairs hallway carrying a compact rifle. Walter fired immediately. The muzzle flash lit the cabin bright white for half a second. The intruder disappeared backward. Gunfire erupted through the walls almost instantly. Rounds shredded wood paneling beside Cole's head. Shadow barked wildly. Cole grabbed the dog's harness and pulled him behind the overturned couch as splinters exploded across the room. More shots cracked from outside. Coordinated. Multiple angles. Mason's people were pinning them down, while another breach team pushed inside. Walter worked the bolt on the rifle and fired again toward the staircase. A body crashed somewhere upstairs, but another set of boots immediately replaced it. Too many. Cole spotted movement near the side window and hurled the cast-iron poker through the remaining glass. The intruder outside ducked instinctively. Walter shouted over the chaos. "Tree line north side. Funnel them there." Cole understood immediately. Narrow approach between the woodshed and propane tank. Choke point. Limited angles. He grabbed Shadow and moved low through the smoke and dust filling the cabin. The dog limped badly now, but still tracked every sound before Cole heard it. Outside, the blizzard had become almost whiteout conditions. Perfect for close movement, terrible for escape. Another burst of gunfire ripped through the roofline. Then Mason's voice cut through the storm one last time. "Where's the hard drive, Bennett?" Cole froze. Hard drive, not papers, not tapes. Something bigger still hidden in the bunker. Walter heard it too. The old Marine looked toward Cole with sudden realization spreading across his face. Then the upstairs floorboards creaked heavily overhead. Not one man, several. And they were finally inside the cabin for real. The upstairs floor groaned under heavy boots. Snow blew through shattered windows while gunfire ripped through the walls in short, controlled bursts. Walter fired once toward the staircase. A man shouted upstairs. Another replaced him immediately. Too disciplined, too organized. Mason brought professionals. Cole crouched low behind the overturned couch, with Shadow pressed against his side. The dog's breathing came rough and uneven now, blood slowly darkening the bandages around his shoulder. Still alert, still listening, still protecting. "Move," Walter barked. Cole grabbed Shadow's harness and pulled the shepherd toward the hallway leading upstairs. Not escape, the bunker, their only real chance. Another burst of rifle fire exploded through the ceiling above them. Dust rained down across the cabin while somebody shouted commands upstairs. "North room clear. Push." Lower level. Mason's men were sweeping room by room. Methodical. Walter slammed another bolt into the rifle chamber. "You know what funneling means?" he growled toward Cole. Cole nodded once. The old Marine pointed toward the narrow hallway behind the kitchen. "Only way downstairs is single file." Good. That meant they couldn't rush all at once. Cole dragged a heavy oak table sideways across the hallway, while Walter overturned a bookshelf behind it. Makeshift barricade. Not strong, but enough to slow movement. Shadow suddenly growled hard toward the living room. Too late, a dark figure crashed through the side window in a spray of glass and snow. Walter fired instantly. The man dropped before his boots fully touched the floor, but another muzzle flashed from outside. The rifle round punched through the wall beside Walter's shoulder, spinning the old Marine sideways into the staircase railing. "Walter, I'm fine," he snapped through clenched teeth. Blood soaked through the sleeve of his sweater anyway. Cole grabbed Shadow and moved, fast down the hallway, past the kitchen, up the hidden stairs toward the second-floor bedroom. The old hatch still gaped open beneath the torn floorboards. Cold bunker air drifted upward through the opening. Behind them, Mason's men were already hitting the barricade downstairs. Wood cracked. Furniture splintered. Shadow hesitated at the hatch. Not fear, pain. Cole climbed down first and reached upward. "Come on, buddy." The German shepherd lowered himself carefully, rung by rung, despite the injured leg. Halfway down, he slipped once with a sharp whine before Cole caught the harness and steadied him. Walter came last, dragging the rifle behind him. The moment his boots hit bunker concrete, another crash thundered above. They breached the hallway. Walter slammed the hatch shut overhead. Darkness swallowed them instantly except for Cole's flashlight beam. The old Marine leaned heavily against the concrete wall, breathing harder now. Blood dripped steadily from his arm. "You hit bad?" "Still attached." Cole moved down the bunker corridor quickly. No time, no options. The underground hallway seemed smaller now, more claustrophobic with men hunting them directly overhead. Shadow limped past him, nose twitching constantly. Then the dog stopped, dead still. Cole followed the flashlight beam toward the far wall beside the old radio room. Nothing there except rusted shelving and concrete. Shadow barked once, short, focused. Cole stepped closer. The shepherd pawed weakly at the base of an old military radio console bolted into the wall. Walter frowned behind them. "What's he got?" Cole swept the light lower, scratches, fresh ones. Around one side of the radio housing, he grabbed the edge and pulled. At first, nothing moved. Then the entire radio cabinet shifted outward with a metallic scrape. Hidden compartment. Walter stared in disbelief. "Well, I'll be damned." Inside the narrow cavity sat a small black Pelican case coated in dust. Military issue. Waterproof. Locked. Cole's pulse tightened instantly. Shadow sat down beside the compartment like he'd finally found what he'd been searching for all night. The shepherd's tail tapped weakly once against the concrete floor. "Good dog." Cole opened the case carefully. Inside sat a rugged external hard drive wrapped beside several sealed memory cards and a stack of old documents tied together with military cord. On top rested a folded photograph. Cole picked it up slowly, his father, younger, standing beside a helicopter in Afghanistan, and beside him, Mason Vick, both men smiling like brothers. Cole stared at it silently. Walter looked away first. "Before Kandahar," he muttered quietly. Another impact slammed somewhere above them. Closer now. The bunker ceiling vibrated. Mason's men had found the hatch. Cole lifted the hard drive carefully. A small label had been taped across the front in faded handwriting. "If this is open, trust nobody." His father's writing. Cole swallowed once. Walter stepped closer slowly. There should be more. Cole looked inside the Pelican case again. Beneath the documents sat one final item. A mini DV tape, old, labeled only with a date, October 14th, 2002, the day his father died. Walter's face drained of color. "No," Cole looked at him sharply. "What is it?" The old Marine rubbed one trembling hand across his mouth. "That tape was supposed to be destroyed." Heavy banging suddenly thundered overhead. Boom, boom, boom. Dust drifted from the bunker ceiling. Shadow staggered upright immediately, growling toward the corridor entrance. Then a voice echoed faintly down through the hatch above them. "Mason, calm, cold. You found it, didn't you?" Cole's grip tightened around the hard drive. Walter chambered another rifle round, despite the shaking in his hands. Above them, metal screamed loudly. Thermal tools, cutting equipment. Mason wasn't trying to force the hatch anymore. He was burning through it, and they were running out of time underground. The sound above them grew louder, metal screaming, concrete vibrating. Mason's team had brought thermal cutters, professional breach equipment. Orange sparks began falling through tiny seams around the hatch overhead, drifting down into the bunker like burning snow. Walter looked up grimly. 3 minutes, he muttered. Maybe less. Cole shoved the hard drive, memory cards, and DV tape into the Pelican case and snapped it shut hard. Shadow stood beside him, swaying slightly from blood loss. But the dog still faced the corridor entrance instead of resting. Still guarding, always guarding. Another violent impact rattled the bunker ceiling. Dust exploded downward. Somewhere above them, the cabin groaned loudly. Walter suddenly turned toward the far end of the underground hallway. "There's another exit." Cole looked at him sharply. "You knew?" "Not exactly." The old Marine coughed once into his sleeve. Blood spotted the fabric. "Raymond mentioned an emergency route years ago. Old Snowcat Tunnel built into the ridge during the Cold War." Cole grabbed Walter's arm. "You should've led with that." Walter almost smiled tiredly. "I wasn't planning on the whole mountain trying to kill us tonight." The hatch above shrieked louder. A glowing orange circle slowly appeared in the steel overhead, cutting torch. They were nearly through. Shadow growled hard. Cole switched off the flashlight briefly. Darkness swallowed the bunker. Then he saw it. A faint draft moving dust near the far wall. Airflow, tunnel. Cole snapped the light back on and moved fast toward the end of the corridor. Old storage shelves lined the concrete walls, beside rusted fuel drums and collapsed crates. Shadow limped beside him. Walter followed slower now, one hand pressed against his bleeding shoulder. Cole swept the flashlight across the wall until the beam caught a faded yellow stripe, painted beside an old electrical box. "Exit Route C," half hidden beneath dust. "There," Walter breathed. Cole grabbed the edge of the electrical cabinet and pulled hard. Nothing. Locked. The bunker ceiling thundered overhead. Somebody shouted through the hatch above. "Breach almost open." Mason's voice followed calmly. "Alive, if possible." Cole planted both boots against the concrete and yanked again with everything he had left. Metal shrieked loudly. The cabinet ripped outward. Behind it sat a narrow steel door nearly invisible against the bunker wall. Walter exhaled sharply. "I'll be damned." Cole grabbed the wheel lock handle and twisted, frozen, stuck after decades underground. Above them, the hatch suddenly burst inward with a deafening metallic crash. Voices echoed into the bunker. Flashlights stabbed downward through falling sparks. "They're below," Shadow barked furiously. Walter spun and fired instantly toward the opening. The rifle blast deafened the bunker. A man screamed above. Cole twisted the wheel harder. The steel mechanism groaned painfully. "Come on." Another burst of gunfire exploded downward through the hatch shaft. Concrete chipped beside Cole's head. Walter fired again. Bolt. Fire. Bolt. Old Marine rhythm. Shadow planted himself beside Walter, despite the injured shoulder, barking wildly toward the ladder. Cole heaved against the wheel one final time. Something snapped. The door jerked inward. Freezing mountain air blasted through the opening. Tunnel. Narrow. Dark but open. "Move!" Cole shouted. Walter backed toward them while firing one last shot toward the hatch above. Then came Mason's voice again. Close now. Almost amused. "You still sacrificing yourself for dead men, Walt?" Walter froze for half a second. Long enough for Cole to see something settle inside the old Marine's face. Decision. Walter shoved the rifle into Cole's hands. "Get him out." Cole stared at him. "No." Walter grabbed the front of his jacket hard. "Your father died trying to protect that evidence. Don't waste it arguing with me." Another flashlight beam swept down the bunker shaft. Closer. Mason's men were descending. Walter looked toward Shadow. The dog stood trembling beside Cole, but still refused to retreat. The old Marine knelt painfully and scratched behind Shadow's ears once. "You did good, old boy." Shadow licked the old man's hand. Walter stood again and reached into his coat pocket. A detonator. Cole's stomach dropped instantly. "You rigged the bunker?" Walter nodded once. "Raymond rigged the whole cabin 20 years ago." Another man appeared halfway down the ladder above them carrying a rifle. Walter fired point blank. The body crashed backward into the shaft. Then the old Marine looked at Cole one final time. "Snowcats at the end of the tunnel. Fuel line should still work if God hasn't quit on us completely." Cole didn't move. Walter shoved him hard toward the tunnel entrance. "That's an order, Ranger." For one brief second, Cole saw his father in him. Same eyes, same exhaustion. Same acceptance men carried right before they stayed behind. The bunker shook violently again. Mason's men were dropping into the corridor now. Cole grabbed Shadow's harness and pulled the dog into the tunnel. Shadow resisted, trying to stay, trying to protect. Cole wrapped both arms around the shepherd and dragged him backward into darkness. Walter raised the rifle toward the corridor. Then he looked toward Cole one last time. "Your father was proud of you." The tunnel door slammed shut. Cole stumbled backward through darkness, pulling Shadow beside him, while the sound of gunfire erupted violently beyond the steel door. The narrow tunnel curved sharply downward through solid rock beneath the mountain. Old emergency bulbs flickered weakly overhead, barely alive after decades underground. Then came the explosion. The mountain itself seemed to jump. A deafening roar thundered through the tunnel as shockwaves blasted dust and hot air past Cole, hard enough to knock him to one knee. Shadow yelped beside him. Somewhere behind them, the cabin above the ridge erupted into flames. Cole shut his eyes briefly. Walter was gone. The old Marine finally paid his debt. Snow and smoke drifted faintly through cracks overhead as Cole forced himself back to his feet. The tunnel stretched onward into darkness. Shadow leaned heavily against his leg now, limping badly but still moving. Cole tightened his grip on the pelican case. Behind them, fire consumed the mountain. Ahead of them, the tunnel disappeared into blackness. And somewhere beyond the storm, Mason Vick was still alive. Cole kept moving. One hand carried the pelican case tight against his chest. The other stayed wrapped around Shadow's harness. The tunnel sloped downward beneath the mountain, narrow enough in places that Cole's shoulders scraped damp stone walls. Old emergency bulbs flickered overhead every 20 feet, some dead completely, leaving stretches of total darkness between weak pools of yellow light. Shadow limped badly now. Each step left small, dark drops across the concrete. Cole noticed everyone. The explosion behind them still echoed faintly through the mountain. Somewhere above, the cabin burned against the blizzard while decades of secrets collapsed into fire. Walter was gone. Cole forced the thought down before it could stay too long. Survival first, grieve later. That had been the rule overseas too. The tunnel finally widened after several hundred yards and opened into a rusted steel garage carved directly into the mountain rock. An old snowcat sat waiting beneath dusty tarps, exactly where Walter said it would be. Cole exhaled sharply. The machine looked ancient but intact. Good enough. Shadow collapsed beside the vehicle before Cole could stop him. The German shepherd's breathing sounded shallow now. Cole knelt immediately beside him. "Hey." Shadow lifted his head weakly. Snowmelt dripped steadily from the concrete ceiling around them. The smell of diesel fuel and cold metal filled the underground garage. Cole peeled back the blood-soaked bandages carefully. The wound looked angry but clean, no arterial hit. Lucky, if luck still existed. Cole dug through an old maintenance locker mounted on the wall nearby and found faded emergency blankets, antifreeze, and an ancient first aid kit. He cleaned the wound again under flickering light while Shadow stayed perfectly still despite the pain. Good dog. Always a good dog. Cole tied fresh bandages tight around the shoulder. Then he rested one hand briefly against the shepherd's neck, warm, alive. Outside the tunnel exit, wind howled through pine trees somewhere beyond the steel blast door. Cole moved toward the snowcat and climbed inside. The ignition coughed twice before the engine finally roared awake beneath him. Diesel smoke filled the chamber instantly. Still running after all these years. Raymond planned for everything. Cole looked once toward the darkness behind them. Toward the mountain. Toward Walter. Then he shifted the snowcat into gear. The steel exit door groaned open slowly. A wall of white blizzard swallowed the world outside. Cole drove into it anyway. The snowcat crawled through deep drifts beneath towering black pines, while dawn slowly began bleeding gray across the mountains. Snow hammered the windshield hard enough to blur visibility down to 20 feet. Shadow lay across the passenger floor, wrapped in emergency blankets. Every few minutes, Cole reached down just to feel the dog breathing. Still there, still fighting. Hours later, the storm finally weakened near the lower highway roads outside Missoula. Cole stopped at an old gas station clinic just after sunrise. The veterinarian took one look at Shadow and rushed him inside immediately. Cole sat alone in the waiting room afterward, holding the pelican case between his boots. Mud, blood, smoke. His hands still smelled like bunker dust and burned wood. The television mounted in the corner suddenly shifted to breaking news coverage. A wildfire in the Bitterroot Mountains. Authorities responding. Remote cabin destroyed. No survivors confirmed. Cole stared silently at the screen. Walter disappeared into smoke and static while reporters guessed at propane explosions and storm damage. Nobody mentioned contractors. Nobody mentioned Kandahar. Not yet. 3 days later, Cole sat inside a motel room outside Seattle while rain tapped softly against the windows. Shadow slept beside the heater wearing fresh stitches and a shaved patch around his shoulder, alive. Cole finally opened the hard drive. The files inside were worse than he imagined. Combat footage, drone recordings, payment ledgers, contractor communications, and one final video file marked OS 814 full. Cole hesitated before pressing play. The image shook violently at first. Gunfire echoed somewhere outside the vehicle recording. Then his father appeared on screen. Burned, bleeding, barely conscious, but alive. Daniel Bennett looked directly into the camera. "If this reaches my son," he coughed hard. "None of this was your fault." Cole couldn't breathe for a second. His father continued weakly. "They'll bury this because it protects powerful men. Don't let them." Then another voice appeared off camera, Mason. Younger, calm. "We can still fix this, Daniel." Cole's pulse slowed dangerously. The video ended with gunfire, nothing else. Cole shut the laptop slowly. Rain continued against the motel windows. Shadow lifted his head from the bed and looked at him quietly. No words existed big enough for what sat inside Cole's chest now, so he just rested one hand against the dog's fur. Weeks later, the files exploded across national news. Contractor investigations, congressional hearings, classified operations reopened. Mason Vick's name appeared everywhere, then disappeared the moment federal warrants were issued. He ran before they reached him, coward, but no longer untouchable. Spring arrived slowly in Montana. Snow melted from the mountains in long silver streams. Cole drove back to the ridge one final time. Nothing remained of the old cabin except blackened stone foundations and twisted metal buried beneath ash. The fire had taken everything, secrets included. Shadow limped beside him through wet grass and melted snow. The dog stopped near the old porch foundation and looked toward the mountains quietly. Cole stood there a long time. Wind moved softly through the pines now. No gunfire, no shouting, no ghosts waiting behind doors. Just silence, real silence. Months later, a small new cabin stood on the ridge. Simple, solid. Built by Cole's own hands. One evening near sunset, he carried the final box inside, while Shadow waited patiently on the porch. The shepherd still limped slightly from the gunshot wound. Probably always would. Cole opened the new front door slowly. Warm light spilled across the wooden floor inside. He stepped aside. Shadow looked up at him once. Then the old German shepherd walked into the house first. This time there were no hidden bunkers, no men hunting them through storms, no secrets buried beneath the floorboards, only a quiet place to come home to at last. Cole closed the door gently behind them while snow began falling again outside the mountain ridge. But this winter felt different. For the first time in years, neither of them was running anymore. If Shadow had a place in your heart by the end of this story, comment 1 below. And if you believe some truths should never stay buried, no matter how many years pass, comment never hidden. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications because the next story, waiting beyond the next dark road, might be even more powerful than this one. And trust me, some doors should absolutely stay closed. But the next one, you're going to